Sakamoto Days is one of the best new series of this season. The critical reception's been quite positive, with the show currently sitting at 76% on AniList. However, there was a lot of negativity and skepticism surrounding this anime leading up to its premiere a month ago. Many fans were quick to voice their concerns over TMS Entertainment's handling of the production based on the initial preview trailers. Most of the criticisms were aimed at the animation and art direction, which some folks believed lacked fluidity and was too simplistic. Others were worried about the quality of the fight choreography, given how outstanding this aspect is in the manga. As the start date for the anime drew closer, Netflix released the show's opening sequence on their YouTube channel. Once again, the reception from fans was pretty tepid, with many of them making assumptions about the show's presentation based on the video's animation quality. While some people really enjoyed the original song by Vondi, others felt that the visuals weren't dynamic enough, and that the action lacked impact and was too sparse. By that point, it seemed like most of the fanbase had already written off this anime, despite having seen very little of the show. As someone who was excited to experience Yuto Suzuki's work for the first time through this anime, I couldn't help but feel a bit irritated by the pessimistic attitude many manga readers had toward the series. TMS Entertainment's track record's pretty good, so I had no doubt they could do the manga justice without the big budget other popular shonen anime often have. Thankfully, the reception to the final trailer Netflix uploaded a few days ago before the first episode dropped was overwhelmingly positive. All of a sudden, those folks that were ready to dismiss this series were as quiet as a church mouse. While the production value isn't quite on par with other high-profile anime out there, this adaptation's still very entertaining and well worth watching. For those unfamiliar with the show, Sakamoto Days is centered around Taro Sakamoto, a former hitman once revered as the world's greatest assassin. After falling in love and getting married, Taro leaves behind his career as a professional killer to live a peaceful life with his wife Aoi and his daughter Hana. For 5 years, the former legendary assassin enjoyed the tranquility of a normal life with his family, and soon grew out of shape. During this time, Taro begins managing a convenience store while establishing himself as a respected member of the local community. Unfortunately, this period of peace is suddenly interrupted, when one day his old partner Shin Asakura is sent by his boss to ask him to come out of retirement. When Taro refuses to return to his job as a hitman, Shin reluctantly tries to kill him the next day, but ultimately fails to do so. Following his botched assassination attempt, Shin shares a meal with the Sakamoto family, and begins to understand Taro's desire to protect his loved ones. Afterwards, he meets up with his boss, and tries to convince him to let Taro off the hook for quitting without permission by offering his own life as compensation. However, when Shin realizes his boss never intended to honor their agreement, he finds himself in a desperate struggle for survival against him and a group of assassins. Just as things start to look grim for Shin, Taro arrives at the warehouse and swiftly takes down the remaining enemies. With the assassins incapacitated, Taro gives him a job working as a store clerk. The next day, they go to Chinatown to buy meat buns for his family, and cross paths with Xiaotong Lu, the daughter of a Chinese mob boss. After she explains her current situation to them, Shin and Taro agree to help defend Xiaotong against a rival mafia gang, the Donsho Kai, in exchange for homemade meat buns. Shortly after their victory over Donsho Kai, Xiaotong starts working at Taro's store alongside Shin. As they struggle to get used to each other's work ethic, Taro's old colleague, Nagamo, drops by to warn him about the bounty being placed on his head by the Japanese Association of Assassins, JAA. Determined to protect those precious to him and live a quiet life with them, Taro teams up with his new employees to fend off the relentless killers seeking to cash in on his demise. The beginning of the story has been fairly solid across the board so far. Conceptually, the initial premise is pretty straightforward, and very reminiscent of action movies like John Wick and Nobody. Much like Sakamoto Days, those films are also about a retired hitman that jumps back into action years later after finally settling down. However, this anime isn't as dark or visceral as those movies, and features many lighthearted moments between the characters. The action's also more exaggerated, and the protagonist takes a non-lethal approach when fighting his enemies, due to a promise he made to his wife. Fortunately, neither his family's no-killing policy nor his hefty physique are enough to slow him down. Taro can still take down multiple enemies with ease. His incredible combat prowess and legacy as the highly revered legendary assassin are highlighted in the series premiere. Suzuki wastes no time setting up the character early on, and elaborates on his past through several flashbacks in later episodes. At the core of this character is Taro's love for his family. Beyond that though, there doesn't seem to be much else to him. Although he isn't a very complex or intriguing protagonist, Taro's still quite endearing and pretty cool. He's fairly similar to the type of strong, silent action heroes seen in movies like the ones I mentioned earlier. Unlike those films, though, we're given a window into his thoughts and feelings through Shin's clairvoyant ability, which allows him to read people's minds. His power is also used as a clever framing device that contextualizes a couple flashbacks as memories of Taro's past with Aoi. Shin is a slightly more interesting character than Taro, and functions as a decent foil to him. Whereas Taro tends to be a bit stoic and reserved, Shin is much more talkative and excitable, almost like a kid. The series dives into his backstory during its second story arc, which shows how he got his special power and where he grew up. What's been revealed so far about his past does raise a couple of questions about his origin that will probably be answered down the line. Regardless, that particular storyline adds a bit of dimension to the character, while also strengthening his bonds with Lu and the idiotic sniper, Heisuke Mashimo. Generally speaking, the characters introduced so far don't seem to have much depth to them. That's not to say they're completely flat or boring by any means, just that they come across as rather simplistic. This really isn't an issue though, as the characters are well written and serve the show's fairly straightforward narrative. Although this series might not have a very complex cast, there's at least some intrigue surrounding the main antagonist, Slur, a mysterious killer who's been targeting the members of the JAA. The build-up for this character has been pretty solid so far, with the audience given a glimpse of how strong he is by the aftermath of a couple of his killing sprees. In addition to this menacing villain, the JAA's elite enforcers, known as the Order, could be a potentially interesting group going forward. With all that being said, what makes the cast of Sakamoto Days so appealing and fun is their distinctive personalities and unique methods of fighting. Every remarkable enemy Taro and his extended family face has their own quirks and approach to combat, which makes each one of them memorable. For example, one of the hitmen hired by Dondinkai Limited to kill Taro fights using poison weapons and tends to have an easygoing attitude. Later in the second arc, Shin and Taro go up against a sadomasochist scientist that utilizes injections to boost his strength and scramble the signals in their brains. In both of these instances, they came up with a clever way to defeat their opponent by working together, which was pretty enjoyable to watch. Out of everyone they've encountered so far, the Dondinkai assassins, Boiled and Obiguro, leave the biggest impression, even though they aren't as outlandish as some of the other antagonists. There's a really amusing dynamic between them, where Obiguro keeps getting surprised by Boiled's actions, and charmed by his tough guy act. Combat-wise, Obiguro is a melee-focused fighter that takes pleasure in fighting strong opponents. On the other hand, Boiled's special explosive gear allows him to fight effectively at any range. Taro's clash against him is arguably the most tense battle so far, as it's the only time where the protagonist struggles to defeat someone and is pushed to his limits. The unprecedented display of Taro's vulnerability and the emotion brought in by Boiled's grudge against him really pushes the first part of their brawl above the other fight sequences. Suzuki's created some truly remarkable and elaborate action scenes. The action in Sakamoto Days is generally fast-paced and quite dynamic. There are several instances where the fighting would begin in one location and then suddenly spill over into an entirely different area. For example, one of this anime's most unique action sequences starts out on a roller coaster, but reaches its climax on the stage of a live theme park show. This particular sequence was really exciting because of how the battlefield frequently shifted as Shin and Tatsu continued fighting. In addition to the dynamism found in many of these action scenes, another impressive element of these clashes is the outstanding fight choreography. This was one facet of the source material that I saw praised by many manga readers online. And for good reason too. The battles are both intricately designed and highly creative. Taro's improvised approach to combat makes the action more unpredictable and distinct than what's commonly found in many of the show's contemporaries. The protagonist makes use of everyday items and environmental objects to attack and defend against his enemies. For instance, in one scene, Taro uses food clamps to stop a gang member from stabbing Xiao Tong. In another scene, he knocks an assassin out using a pot he found in a kitchen. Basically, Taro can turn just about anything into a deadly weapon or a sturdy shield. That's what makes the character so cool and unique from a combat standpoint. Animation-wise, I think Team S Entertainment's done an excellent job bringing Suzuki's expertly crafted action scenes to life. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, there was a lot of doubt cast on the studio's ability to properly adapt the author's work. I saw many comments from folks who wished a more notable studio like a Mappa or Wit animated this instead. Given the massive success and popularity of the manga, some fans felt as though it deserved a flashier production, on par with the likes of Jujutsu Kaisen or Kaiju No. 8. I've always believed that quality, rather than sales or renown, should be the key factor in determining whether a property receives a big-budget adaptation. Obviously, that's not how the animation industry works, as these companies would rather invest in what they perceive as potentially profitable, or a surefire hit, but I digress. Based on what I've seen so far, a more grandiose production was certainly justifiable, though not absolutely necessary. Although the art style the studio's chosen isn't exactly eye-catching, the animation quality's been clean and consistent for the most part. During action sequences, TMS Entertainment utilizes several different techniques to punctuate certain moments and keep things visually engaging for the viewer. For example, the studio often makes use of slow motion when characters are in tense situations, or to emphasize the impact of an attack. Another method they use to visually convey the strength behind an attack is through impact frames. The various different techniques that animators use to supplement Suzuki's action scenes are quite effective. While it would be a stretch to say that the studio elevated the material or completely made it their own, TMS Entertainment's efforts to adapt the manga into an anime are still commendable overall. Before I close this video out, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the comedy. This is another aspect of the series that's written and executed adeptly. There are plenty of humorous interactions between the central cast that play off their different personalities and tendencies. For instance, the moments where Shin gets annoyed by Heisuke's pitiful behavior or reads his simple-minded thoughts were pretty funny. There's also a great running gag where Shin notices Taro thinking about killing him whenever he does something that irritates him. These little moments are so seamless and abrupt that you probably won't see them coming. Some of Xiao Tong's foolish behavior while intoxicated around people was pretty unexpected, and very amusing as well. All things considered, Sakamoto Days is a solid action series, with a fun, likable cast, great humor, and creative fight scenes. While it's a bit lacking in terms of narrative depth, and the presentation isn't as awe-inspiring as other big names shown in anime, the writing is consistently good and the animation is generally pretty smooth. If you love action movies with elaborate fight sequences, then you'll probably enjoy this anime. With that said, if you've seen this show, let me know what you thought about it in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.